There's something hauntingly beautiful about silence when the world is still asleep. The city below was nothing but a sleepy blur of lights, blinking slowly as if lost in thought. Somewhere high above it, in a small studio apartment, the glow of a laptop screen was the only thing illuminating the shadows. Maya Ellison hadn't meant to stay up this late, not again. But hope has a strange way of whispering when the night is quietest. She sat curled on a threadbare couch, an old college hoodie wrapped tightly around her. Her hair was a tangled mess of exhaustion, her fingers trembling on the keyboard. This was the 39th resume she'd sent in 3 months. But this one felt like her last shot. No big dreams anymore, no glossy illusions, just the hope of getting her rent paid. She attached her portfolio, typed a short cover letter, heartfelt, and hovered over the send button. Please, she whispered into the silence, let someone believe in me. She hit send, and that was supposed to be it, until she saw the attachment. Her eyes widened. Wrong file, not her design portfolio, but a photo, a deeply personal, raw imager, self-portrait she had taken months ago. For herself, not anyone else. No filters, no makeup. A vulnerable moment of trying to love the skin she was in. To see strength where the world had only told her she was broken. She gasped, heart leaping into her throat. Please, no. Too late. She tried to recall it, but the damage was done. The confirmation email hit her inbox at 2:06 a.m. It had gone out. 2. The CEO of a major global design firm. 2. The billionaire recluse she had only ever heard rumors about. To the one man who could make or break everything. Maya didn't sleep. She sat on the floor of her apartment with her knees pulled to her chest, her heart pounding like it was trying to claw its way out. Regret seeped into her bones, thick and paralyzing. Her mind kept replaying it like a horror reel. The moment her finger clicked send, the realization, the dread. Would they laugh? Would she be blacklisted? Would they think she did it on purpose? The city outside slowly began to stir, but inside her apartment, time felt frozen. She couldn't cry. She couldn't even breathe properly. Shame had a way of making you feel small, even invisible. Maya was 27. She had graduated with honors. She had interned at agencies where she fetched more coffee than compliments. She had poured her soul into her art. But now she felt like she had just undone all of it in a single, humiliating second. At exactly 8:31 a.m., her phone buzzed. She stared at the screen for what felt like minutes before answering. Ellison, a woman's voice, crisp and unreadable. Yes, Maya croaked, her throat dry. Mr. Archer would like to see you at 10 a.m. at Stratus HQ, he said. Bring your portfolio. The line went dead before Maya could respond. Mr. Archer, Eli Archer, the billionaire founder of Stratus Studios, the man who had turned a basement startup into one of the most powerful creative empires in the world. He saw the email, he saw the photo, and he still wanted to meet. By 9:45 a.m., Maya was standing in front of a towering glass skyscraper in Manhattan, arms clutched around her worn leather folder like a lifeline. Her palms were sweaty. Her mind raced. She had borrowed her friend's blazer. Her shoes pinched. Her stomach was in knots. The security guard didn't ask for an ID, nodded once and gestured to the express elevator. Top floor. The ride up felt endless. She tried to calm her breath, but her reflection in the mirrored wall looked like a woman on the edge of collapse. As the doors slid open, a quiet lobby awaited her. Polished wood, soft jazz playing, the smell of espresso. A sleek assistant with an iPad greeted her. Mr. Archer is waiting inside. Don't be nervous. Maya blinked. I'm not. Her voice cracked. Okay, maybe I am. The assistant gave a small smile and opened the heavy glass door. The office was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in gold. At the far end, behind a minimal desk, stood Eli Archer, dressed in charcoal gray, a man with a kind of quiet power that made the room adjust to him. He didn't look up right away. He was scrolling through something on a tablet. Then his eyes met hers, not judgmental, not cold, just observant, quiet, calculating. Maya Ellison, he said simply, like he already knew everything about her. I assume you realized what file you sent. She swallowed, too afraid to speak. Most people, he continued, would be running from this building right now. She forced herself to speak. I'm not most people, she said, though her voice shook. His eyes didn't waver. That's why I asked you here. She blinked. What? That photo? He tapped the tablet, then turned it so she could see. Is more honest than most portfolios I've seen this year. Maya's breath caught. You captured something real, he said. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You weren't posturing. You were telling the truth. And that, he paused, is rare in this industry. She stared at him, stunned. I want to offer you a trial project. 1 week. Show me what you can create when you're not hiding. Her knees almost gave out. I thought I ruined everything. Eli looked at her and said something she would never forget. You only ruin things when you stop trying. Maya left the building in a daze. She had walked in terrified. She walked out, changed, but she had no idea what the next week would hold. No idea that this one mistake, this one vulnerable moment, would ignite something bigger than she'd ever imagined. Because sometimes, the door to your future doesn't open with a plan. It opens with a mistake. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, but the pounding in Maya's chest only grew louder. It felt impossible, like she had just stepped out of a movie and into someone else's life. 1 week, a trial project. From him she kept repeating those words, in her head, hoping they might start to feel real, but they didn't. Not yet. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual chaos, honking taxis, vendors shouting over each other, people walking too fast and talking too loud, but for the first time in weeks, Maya didn't feel invisible in it. She felt, noticed, seen, like she mattered. She walked aimlessly, letting the cold morning air clear her thoughts. The weight of shame had lifted, but in its place bloomed something unfamiliar. It wasn't quite relief, not yet hope, just the shaky beginning of belief. And that was enough. Back at her apartment, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Her reflection was the same, but something in her eyes had shifted. She didn't look like someone who had made a terrible mistake. She looked like someone about to make a brave choice. She didn't waste time. Within hours, she'd cleaned the clutter from her desk, set up her sketchpad, and wrote out every detail she could remember from her meeting with Eli Archer. She hadn't expected him to be so calm, so direct, so unlike the powerful people she had always been warned about. There was something watchful about him. Yes, something unreadable but not cruel. He had looked at her photo and seen courage instead of carelessness. That thought alone made her work harder than she ever had. The project was vague on purpose. Show me what you can create when you're not hiding, he'd said. No rules, number, limits. But how do you show someone your truth when you've spent years trying to shrink it? She stayed up that night sketching. Not just designs, but moments, real ones. The tiny studio she grew up in with her mother. The smell of chalk and cinnamon in her grandma's kitchen. The days in art school when she couldn't afford real supplies and used old magazines to collage her dreams. The train rides that doubled as crying rooms, and the silence of job rejections that never even said her name. She poured all of it into the project. Not perfect lines, not glossy pitches, just truth. Each day that week, she pushed further, drew messier, deeper, louder. She photographed the ordinary and made it beautiful. She stitched pieces of her story together, one brushstroke at a time. She was terrified, but for the first time in a long time, she was also alive. Then Thursday came. Late that evening her phone buzzed. A message, meet me tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp, Studio 43, bring your work, EAHER. Stomach flipped. She read it twice, then 3 times. Studio 43. That was one of Stratus's private creative spaces, rumored to be where top-level campaigns were born. Maya barely slept that night. By the time she arrived the next morning, the sun had barely stretched over the rooftops. The city was quiet again, the way it had been the night she sent that email. Something about that stillness wrapped around her like a sign, like the universe was pressing pause, just long enough for her to step forward. She entered the studio, with her portfolio clutched to her chest. And there he was, Eli Archer, dressed simply, leaning against a long table covered in canvases, film reels, fabric swatches. His eyes lifted to meet hers, and for the first time he smiled. You made it. I wasn't going to miss this, she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Good, he said. Because today, we create. She blinked. We. He nodded toward the table. This room, he said, is where I work with people who don't follow the rules, who've failed, fallen, messed up, people who've lived. He walked over, took her portfolio without asking, and began to flip. Through the pages, silence. Maya tried not to shift on her feet. Her palms were damp again. He reached the final sketch and set the folder down. "You didn't just tell a story," he said slowly. "You invited someone in. That's rare." A breath she didn't realize she'd been holding escaped her lungs. "I think we can build something from this," he continued. "Not just a job, a message." She stared at him, unsure what to say. "Why me?" she asked finally. Eli looked her dead in the eye. "Because you made a mistake that told the truth. And I trust people who aren't afraid of the truth." She sat down, hands trembling again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from possibility. From the feeling that something extraordinary had already begun. And she wasn't just part of it, she was the reason for it. And deep down, she knew this was no accident. It was her moment, her voice. And finally, someone was listening. It was barely past sunrise, but Studio 43 pulsed with something electric, not the kind of electricity you can see, but the kind you feel like a whisper in the air before a storm, or the stillness just before something breaks open. Maya stood in the middle of it, her portfolio spread out on the long table, watching as Eli moved around the room with quiet purpose. He didn't talk much, but when he did, every word had weight. She realized quickly that he wasn't just trying to evaluate her, he was trying to understand her. "You ever feel like you've been carrying a voice that no one's heard yet?" he asked, eyes scanning one of her pieces. Maya nodded slowly. "All the time." "Good," he said, without looking up. "That's who I build with." The hours that followed blurred together, moments of creation, feedback, silence, and more. Creation. They didn't talk much, but when they did, the words always circled something bigger than the work. Around noon, Eli pulled out a faded blueprint and unrolled it. Maya leaned closer. "It wasn't a campaign. It wasn't a layout. It was a street. This is where I grew up," he said quietly. "Before the buildings, before Stratus, before anyone cared what my name was." Maya stared at the hand-drawn lines, the scribbled notes and the margins. There was something raw in them, like he'd been mapping his childhood with more honesty than precision. "I've never shown this to anyone before," he added. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. "Why, me?" she whispered again. But this time it wasn't about a job. It was about trust, about vulnerability, about whatever this fragile thread between them had become. Eli looked out the window, the city glowing behind him. "Because the people who've been invisible," he said, "usually see the most." Something shifted in that moment. The room no longer felt like a test or a task. It felt like a beginning of something neither of them could name yet, but both could feel. They worked well into the evening. At one point, Maya caught herself laughing, really, laughing for the first time in months. Not because something was funny, but because something inside her had finally let go. The fear, the failure, the feeling of being forgotten. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Eli leaned back and stretched. "You hungry?" She blinked, surprised by the question. "A little," she admitted. He grabbed his coat. "Come on. Best soup in the cities, 5 blocks from here. Consider it part of the creative process." They walked in comfortable silence, the kind that only happens between two people who are slowly learning each other's edges. The city lights cast soft reflections in puddles, and for a moment, Maya didn't feel like she was chasing a dream anymore. She felt like she was finally inside it. At the restaurant, a tiny, hidden spot tucked behind an old bookstore, he ordered for both of them without asking. She didn't mind. Somehow, it felt like he already knew. Between spoonfuls and soft conversation, she asked a question that had been building in her chest all day. "What made you build Stratus the way you did? So private, so quiet." Eli stirred his soup for a moment before answering. "Because the world gets loud when it doesn't understand you. I figured if I built something that listened more than it talked, maybe it'd attract people who needed the same." Maya nodded, her heart catching on those words. She had spent years screaming silently into closed doors, trying to prove she belonged somewhere. And now, here was someone who had built an open one just by listening. When they returned to the studio, the city was quieter. Lights shimmered like small promises, and the night air carried a chill that felt more refreshing than cold. As they packed up, Eli paused and looked at her. "You're not here because of a mistake," he said. "You're here because he showed me something I couldn't forget." Maya looked back at him, unsure how to hold that kind of honesty. It felt like a gift but also like a responsibility. That night, as she walked home alone, the streets didn't feel so big anymore. Her steps felt steadier, her shoulders lighter. She wasn't just working on a project now. She was building something from the inside out. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly see yet, was that her story was beginning to ripple far beyond this one room, this one man, this one chance. Because across the city, someone else had seen the email too. Someone who wasn't impressed. Someone who didn't believe in mistakes turning into opportunity. Someone who wanted her gone. The real test hadn't even started yet. Asterisk 3 weeks. That's how long it took for everything to shift from quiet mornings and creative fires to something that felt like the edge of a storm. Maya had never felt more alive and more unsure at the same time. She was pouring herself into the work with Eli, each day uncovering layers of her story she didn't know she still carried. But outside the walls of Studio 43, someone else was watching, and not everyone watching was rooting for her. It started with whispers, a strange look in the elevator, a pause in conversation when she entered a room. At first, Maya brushed it off. Maybe it was in her head. Maybe she was still adjusting to being seen. But then came the email. No subject, no signature, just 4 words. How did you get here? At first, she froze. Her stomach turned. It felt like a rope tightening around her lungs. Then, a second email. Kim, this one had a screenshot her photo. That photo, the one she'd sent by mistake. It had been blurred out. But the threat was clear. Someone knew, and they wanted her to feel it. Maya closed her laptop and sat in the silence of her tiny apartment. The same walls that had once comforted her now felt like they were closing in. For a moment, she thought about quitting, walking away before whatever was coming could hit her full force. But then she remembered Eli's voice, low, certain, unshakable. You're here because you showed me something I couldn't forget. And just like that, the fear began to crack. The next day at the studio, Maya didn't say a word about the emails. Not yet. Instead, she doubled down on the work. Her ideas came faster now, bolder. She began designing not just for approval, but with purpose. Her sketches told stories of resilience, of belonging, of becoming. Her concepts weren't just beautiful. They were honest, and people noticed. People talked, but not everyone was pleased. Inside Stratus, where silence was golden and appearances meant everything, Maya was starting to create a ripple too loud to ignore. There were veterans who had been waiting years for a moment like hers, and suddenly a girl with no name, no connections, and a controversial email was sitting in the creative room with Eli Archer himself. And one of them, Mila Caro, had had enough. Eli was sharp, polished, a straightest loyalist. She had spent nearly a decade climbing the silent ladder, never making a mistake, never stepping out of line. She had built her success on precision, power, and perception, and she couldn't understand how someone like Maya had bypassed it all. She wasn't cruel, just calculating, and she believed in systems, in paying your dues the hard way. So when she overheard 2 junior designers whispering about Maya and the photo, her path became clear. It wasn't about destroying Maya, it was about reminding Eli and everyone else how the system was supposed to work. That afternoon, during a routine staff review, Isla casually dropped a printed copy of the email chain onto the boardroom table. No drama, no accusation, just a quiet, cutting question. Is this the kind of exposure we're aligning our brand with now? The room went silent. Eli looked down at the papers. His jaw tightened, but his expression remained unreadable. He didn't speak right away, just sat there, the weight of the moment pressing in like a storm cloud. After a long pause, he stood up, collected the papers, and simply said, "Meeting's over." And that was it. No defense, no punishment, no explanation. But something had changed when Maya arrived the next morning. The air felt colder. The receptionist avoided her eyes. The elevator took longer to arrive. And when she entered Studio 43, Eli was already there, pacing. He looked up, eyes sharp, tired. "We need to talk," he said. She sat down slowly, her throat dry. "I know," she said quietly. "I got the emails too." Eli studied her, surprised. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to make it bigger than it was." He exhaled through his nose, hands on his hips. "Maya, this was never just about a project, or even a job. I brought you in because I thought you could help shift something, but now they're turning this into a liability." "So what does that mean?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "It means," he said, walking toward the window, "you have a choice. We can lay low, ride this out quietly, or we make A statement. She frowned. What kind of statement? He turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw it not just the brilliance in him, but the battle. He wasn't untouchable. He was resisting. A public exhibition, he said. Your work, your story. We launch it under Stratus, as is. No edits, no apologies, just truth. Maya's heart dropped into her stomach. You want to highlight the photo. I want to highlight you, he corrected. But you need to. Wanted to? She looked at her hands. They were shaking. People will talk, she said. They already are. He replied. She met his eyes. If I do this, I can't go back. He nodded. Good, because forward's the only way worth going. And just like that, the decision was made. Not because Maya didn't fear the fallout, but because she had finally stopped fearing herself. She was no longer just the girl who'd sent the wrong file. She was the woman who was about to reclaim the narrative on her own terms. But what neither she nor Eli knew yet was that the fallout wouldn't come from inside the studio. It was coming from the outside, from someone who hadn't forgotten her past, from someone who had a score to settle, and it would threaten not just her career, but everything she'd come to believe about second chances. Asterisk. The night before the exhibition, the city didn't sleep, and neither did Maya. Outside her apartment window, headlights streaked past like racing thoughts, and the low hum of the city buzzed against her ribs. Her sketches lay scattered across the floor, her final pieces lined up with clinical precision. But her mind wasn't calm, because this wasn't just a launch. This was her leap. Everything was ready. The collection, the statement, the story, her story, unedited, unfiltered, unapologetic. Eli had insisted they keep the title simple, unframed, no logos, no glamour, just truth. But while the world was about to see the woman Maya had become, someone else was preparing to drag her back to who she used to be. She didn't hear the knock when it first came. 3 sharp taps against the door, like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence she didn't write. When she finally opened it, the face staring back wasn't one she'd expected. Chris. Her ex. The man she hadn't seen in almost 2 years. The man who once loved her like a promise until life got hard, and he disappeared like a shadow in sunlight. What are you doing here? She asked, keeping the door halfway closed. Chris shoved his hands into his coat pockets, avoiding her gaze. I saw the posts. Your name came up, and someone sent me the photo. Her blood turned to ice. Of course, it was always just a matter of time before her past collided with her present. But somehow, she thought she'd be ready for it. She wasn't. It's not what it looks like, she said quietly. He let out a dry laugh. You don't owe me an explanation. That's not why I'm here. She studied him. His face hadn't changed much, still that tired charm, the eyes that used to read her like a book. But there was something else behind them now. Regret, jealousy, guilt. I came to say something, he continued. I messed things up back then. I let my own failures make me bitter. You didn't deserve what I put you through. Maya blinked. She hadn't expected an apology. Not after all this time. You could have said this a year ago, she said. I didn't know how, he replied. But seeing you now, what you're doing, it shook me. I guess I wanted you to know that someone from your past is proud of you. The words hit her like soft thunder. Part of her wanted to slam the door. Part of her wanted to cry. But mostly, she just felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Closure. She nodded slowly. Thank you. Chris gave her a small smile. Good luck tomorrow. And just like that, he turned and disappeared into the night. But even after he was gone, Maya stood there letting the silence hold her. The next morning, the gallery was buzzing before the doors even opened. Press, curators, influencers, people Maya didn't know, and some she wished she never had. The buzz around Unframed had grown louder by the hour, and now it was real. There were no backup plans, no edits, no curtains to hide behind. As the doors opened, Eli walked beside her, his face unreadable as ever. You ready? He asked. No, she said honestly, but I'm here. He smiled. That's enough. The first piece hung against a stark white wall, a portrait hand-drawn, intimate, imperfect, of a young woman staring directly at the viewer, defiant and vulnerable at once. Beneath it, a single sentence. This is what healing looks like before it's finished. People stopped in their tracks. Some stared, some whispered, some cried, but no one looked away. As the room filled, Maya felt the energy shift. This wasn't scandal, it was something deeper. The rawness of her work wasn't just art, it was memory, it was recovery, It was a mirror, and people saw themselves in it. A woman in her 50s approached her with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for being brave, for saying what I never could." A teenager tapped her shoulder and showed her a sketchbook, trembling. In his hands, "I draw too," he said, "but I've never shown anyone." One by one, the walls she'd built inside herself began to crumble, not because she was being applauded, but because she was finally being understood. Eli joined her at the back of the gallery, watching as people circled the room. He didn't say much. He never had to, but he looked at her then like someone who saw not just the art, but the entire journey it took to make it. But just as Maya allowed herself to exhale, her phone buzzed. A message. No name, no number, just 4 words again. "It's not over yet." She stared at it, her stomach twisting. Before she could react, another message followed, this time with a photo, a very different one, not of her, but of Eli Doubt. It showed him leaving her apartment, the angle, the grain. It was surveillance. Suddenly, it wasn't just her being watched, and the realization hit her all at once. This wasn't about the photo anymore. It wasn't about her past. It was about control, about silencing a story that had become too loud, about keeping things in line in a world that only applauded truth when it was convenient. Maya looked at Eli, who was still smiling softly, unaware of what had just landed in her inbox. She knew right then that the fight wasn't over, but this time, she wouldn't be fighting for her career, she'd be fighting for both of them. Asterisk. The message stayed on her screen like a burn mark for words glowing back at her. "It's not over yet." Maya's fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing what this moment meant. She'd stood in front of the world, finally whole, finally seen, and someone was already trying to break her apart again. But this time, it wasn't about shame. It was about control, about intimidation, about silencing something powerful before it could grow louder. And the most dangerous part, they weren't aiming just at her anymore. They were aiming at Eli too. She looked across the gallery. He stood near one of her sketches, chatting with a small group of critics, completely unaware of the silent storm building behind the scenes. He looked calm, collected, proud, like a man who had bet on something risky and was finally watching it bloom. But Maya knew something else. The photo that had been sent to her, Eli leaving her apartment, wasn't accidental. It was meant to corner her, to shame them both, to weaponize perception against reality. They were no longer just collaborators. Not to the people watching, not to whoever was behind the messages. And in a world like theirs, where reputation could be twisted with a whisper, she knew what came next if she didn't act. Headlines, silence, and then erasure. She couldn't let that happen. Not to herself, not to him, not to the truth. She tucked the phone into her bag and crossed the room, steady steps over marble floors. Eli saw her coming and smiled, but his smile faded as he caught the storm in her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low. He stepped aside, instantly serious. They found a quiet hallway behind the gallery, where the buzz of the crowd dulled into background noise. Maya showed him the photo, watched as his jaw clenched. "Who sent this?" he asked. "No name, no signature, but they've been watching. First the photo leak, then the emails, now this." He stared at the image for a long moment, then looked up. "They want us to hide. They want us to regret," she corrected. "They want us to be afraid of what we've created." Eli exhaled, slowly, like a man measuring every outcome. "If this goes public, they'll call it favoritism, scandal, maybe worse." "I know," she said, "but if we back down now, we'll be proving them right." He looked at her, looked the way someone looked when they see not just another person, but a mirror. She wasn't the girl who had walked into Stratus 3 months ago. She was something else now. "I'm with you," he said. 3 hours later, the exhibition was closed to the public, but Maya and Eli weren't done. They crafted a statement, together, not a press release, not a defense, a confession of truth. They posted it side by side on their social feeds, unfiltered, unafraid. 3 months ago, I sent the wrong file. I thought it would end everything. Instead, it became the start of something real. Art is messy, truth is louder than image, and vulnerability is not weakness. I am not ashamed of what I survived, and I will not be quiet about what I've built. With Eli Archer, I've created work that speaks, that dares, that breathes. And if my honesty threatens systems built on silence, then let them fall. Eli's follow-up post read simply, didn't choose Maya because of a mistake. I chose her because, in a world full of masks, she showed me her truth. We build brands that sell confidence. She is confidence. Let that be the legacy. The posts went viral within hours. Some people cheered, others called for their resignation. Gossip columns exploded. Corporate backdoors buzzed. Investors demanded meetings. But Maya didn't flinch. Because for the first time, the world didn't have to wonder who she was. She had told them. The fallout was brutal at first. Emails flew. Press vultures circled. But behind the noise, something incredible happened. Young artists began tagging Maya in their work, calling her brave. Survivors reached out, thanking her for saying the things they never could. Other companies reached out not to cancel her, but to collaborate. Stratus's board was shaken, but Eli stood firm. He refused to retract the statement, refused to backpedal, and in a final twist, no one expected sales skyrocketed, because the people saw themselves in Maya, not just the polished parts, but the raw, messy, resilient ones too. Weeks later, Maya stood once more in front of a crowd, but this time not in a gallery. She was at a college lecture hall, invited to speak to young creators about the power of authenticity. She told them everything, not just the curated parts, the nights of fear, the moment of the mistake, the heartbreak, the photo, the decision to stand tall anyway. And at the end, a student asked her, "Do you ever wish you could take it all back?" Maya paused, then smiled. "No," she said, "because sometimes the wrong file sends you to the right future." And the room erupted in applause. She walked off the stage, head held high, heart open, because she wasn't someone's distraction. She was the main story now.